I'm bringing the further ado. DevOps stands for Development and Operations. You may have heard that before. We develop software, and we operate software. And this is about releasing software, and I warned some of you I'm going to ask you a question. What is software? The way I do this is you put your phone on the table if you don't want me to call on you, rather than you raise your hand. That way I can get a good spread. So, not you. And then I'm going to point at you. You tell me your name and give me an answer. Back corner. Yeah, I don't see a phone. Okay, right here. What's your name? Ford? Yep. What software?
When I think of software, I think of a program that you use to have an end result that you expect.
Software is a program that you can use to have an end result that you've decided, right? Yeah. And hopefully it works well. Yeah. Red shirt. What's your name? Caleb. Manual work that a computer takes over for us with algorithms. I like that. We use software a lot to automate our thoughts, which is why I got into this whole field when I was younger. I was younger yesterday, but let's see. What I want to draw out, software has sort of another word that goes with it called hardware, right? And then there's firmware and wetware, and we've talked about these differences. So software is different than hardware because it's softer than hardware. What do we mean by softer there? Anybody? This will be a hand raise. Who has an idea why that happened? This was way a long time ago, before I was born. Why did they call software soft? That's what we work on all the time. Lucas?
Because you can change it, whereas the hardware is.
Because you can change the hardware the software more easily, way more easily than the software, which is why we have to talk about releasing it. Because we're not releasing the software, we're releasing changes to the software. Because we change software, that's why it's soft, right? So that's why I wanted to talk about releasing software at DevOps OKC. And I should hit this button because this is not on. Hardware. So we release all kinds of things. And I left some blanks up there. So if your phone's on the table, I won't ask you one. What's in the front? What's something we release that's not software? What's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff?
That's not up there?
I don't know. I didn't say that.
Emotions.
We release our emotions. Ooh, that's not bad. Back corner, name? Yeah. Lindsay? What's something we release in your life? We release endorphins. Our glands release endorphins. That's true, yeah. Pink shirt. What's your name? Mitch? His daughter releases gas. So releasing kind of has to do with stuff that we're holding back, or we're constraining, or we're limiting, right? And that's the changes to our software. I wouldn't have to talk about releasing software if they were already not held. Where's the first place we hold what we've changed in our software? Before you've hit save, it's in your text editor. You're holding that change, and if you haven't hit save yet and your machine goes off, your change is gone, right? So the first time we release a change to software is when we hit the save button. Or if it's IntelliJ, if you lose focus, it does it for you. But some tools try to save you from that. Releasing changes is something that happens by itself, but it's also something we think about, because a lot of programmers, every time you hit the save button, it doesn't go to production, right? How many people, raise your hand, if every time you hit the save button, your production environment changes? Really? Previous employment, yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about. Music isn't like that, right? Musicians don't release their music right away either. It's not like I'm telling you you're wrong. I'm saying that we have to think about when do we want to release it and when do we want to not release it, when do we want to hold it back. This is a decision we're making. It's a judgment call about the software we're working on, right? So I went and looked up some definitions. I like to do definitions of words. I did software. Let's do release, right? So the first thing it said is to allow or enable to escape from confinement, to set our software free. I don't know if that's exactly the right definition I wanted to use, but I thought I'd start with that one. The second one was we would allow it to move, act, or flow freely. That's a little closer to production. We're going to allow it to do its job in the real place it's supposed to do it. That's production. All the other ones are not. We don't work to put stuff in QA, at least I don't think that's worth it, right? Or finally, allow information to be generally available. This, some open source licenses use this idea of copyright. So in that case, the code itself is released, right, rather than running software to production. If you're releasing Apache Kafka version 3.2.7, you're not going to run it somewhere. You're going to make it available for other people to download and use, right? That's another type of release. Software is a product, and software is also a running service. And we should keep that straight on the stuff we work on. Are we making a product for someone else to use, or are we going to use it ourselves? Releasing is useful either way. It's also a noun. So the action or process of, this is a useless one. I don't know why it was first, so I crossed it out. The action of making a movie, recording, or other product available for viewing or purchase. People who make proprietary software, that's probably what you're thinking of, right? I want to make a release that someone is going to buy, right? Or maybe the action of releasing property, money, or a right to another. That's like a software license, right? So releasing in software is different than all those other ones I had. I'm going to go back. On these other ones, what I noticed as I dug, and I haven't found examples really, except for software, where we release the same thing again and again and again. Once you release the Kraken, it doesn't need to be released anymore. It's out, right? It's been released. I guess recorded music, kind of, because maybe artists will do a re-release of their 1975 album, and it's supposed to be better, and I don't know if it always is, but it's that usually we don't release the same thing again and again, except in our industry. We go through, and we have this whole semantic versioning thing where we got really complicated about how we identify a series of releases and what they mean. And so in software, this idea of releasing has kind of overgrown what we use it for outside in other industries. Even music, right? I don't mean, even like the Dead or the Fish, like they never played the same song twice, but there's still a CD out there with a name on it that there's not two versions of. I guess even in music, they didn't come up with 2.0 of an album, or 2.3, or 2.3.7 beta 14. Right? It's not useful to do that because nobody really cares, whether this was the one from, I guess maybe bootleggers, right? They might care if this was like 5 years old on a field in Virginia versus like in a studio. But so releasing in software, we got real complicated about because we need to, because software runs our world. Because you're running software and all those thoughts, like he said, are getting automated. And if we did it wrong or if we did it better, it matters because it makes our cars crash, right? Or it makes our refrigerators not keep things cold. Software is running our entire world, so we have to be real careful about automating the way our world works. And so that's why we do this releasing thing, because maybe if I had a wild idea that my refrigerator should save power on, I guess got an email from OG&E about the price is like 1,000,000 cents today because it's really hot. Maybe I could let my refrigerator turn off. Well, that might not be very smart. My food would rot, right? Software ideas are not always good ones. Sometimes we make a mistake implementing an idea, and sometimes we just have a bad idea. We shouldn't release it because we shouldn't have even written it. That's why we do the opposite of releasing. That's why we just hold stuff back. Because we want to try out an idea first before we impose it on all these other people who are driving our automated cars around and trying not to die. We would rather go put it on a test track first and see what happens. So the first idea I'm going to bring to the table is continuous integration, because this is the first mature idea we have in the software industry for managing that change when you have multiple people working on a software product. There's a lot of definitions for this. I like the Agile Alliance's definition. So what's getting integrated? Integration is this word. I do integration at my company, and it's not, well, I do this kind, but what people hire me for is usually integrating other software products. This is not integrating products. This is integrating people's changes. Continuous integration is about trying to get people's changes all together at the same time and make sure they work. The quicker you do it, the better, because otherwise you're waiting a long time and you have a whole lot of changes to look at to see if it worked or not, right? You'd rather look at a few changes. So that's what continuous integration is. In my world, this is not the Agile Alliance. This is Ryan's idea. This is what continuous integration really looks like, right? The first thing that happens is we have this word commit, and I love it because it sounds so emotional. It's not just like I'm going to save a file. It's this is what I meant to do. I'm going to put a message on it, and my name is going to go on it, and there's going to be a timestamp, and it's going to go to another machine. Other people are going to see it. A commit is more of a release than a save, right? A commit is like, okay, I think this is good. I'm ready to sign off and say, I did that, right? And this is why. So commits is the first step, and we commit to source control systems, or also called version control systems. I don't know. Raise your hand if you want to define that one for me. We can work together, or I'll do it. Who uses version control? I'm getting like 80%, maybe. It's a database. That's all a version control system is, a database of our changes. There's a lot of different technologies to do it. You get Subversion and CVS and Git and Perforce and Mercurial. And people made all this technology to put our changes together and keep a history and know this is what our software looks like today. Here's how it got there. Here's who did it and why they did it. That's what source control systems do. It's a database for our changes. To be integrating our change continuously, it sure helps to have a place to put it. That's what we have to do with version control. I tell everybody in my classes that I teach some classes on this, that's the most important one. Yeah, sure, you might want a CI server. Yeah, sure, you might want a dev environment. First, if you don't have source control, stop everything. That's the most important thing to have. You need a place to put your changes so there is one conclusive, canonical version of what you're working on. Right? I'm working on this software. Software changes, right? It's soft, but this has all the changes in a row instead of just the latest copy. That's what source control does. So continuous integration is more than just putting it all in one place. Usually we have some kind of automation, some kind of program out there that takes all those changes and tries to figure out if they're good together. Usually it'll build your software or run some tests on your software. The important part is it's whatever we decide as the human beings who are in charge of this software means that software is going to work. What do we think quality is? It's an intentional judgment call. There's no best practices. You choose what means your software is good. So you take this CI server and you say, I want to check first. Maybe we want to tell that our software can compile. Hey, that's a good start. Maybe we want to know that the software runs if I try to start it without any catastrophic errors. That's another step. Maybe we have some tests we can run on the software. Maybe we want to even, in my case, I believe deployment to an environment is intrinsic to the quality of a software. If it works in your editor, so what? It has to go work on a real server. So I believe continuous integration goes all the way to a real server. And the important part is that back loop, where we find out about the quality of our changes after they've been put together. The important part is not when your tests are green. The important part is when they are red, what happens? Who does it tell? What does it tell them? Because if you find out about a change next Wednesday, today's Friday, we're all going to go back to our offices, hit save, hit commit, and go on our merry way and go home on the weekend, have a bonfire. If we don't find out about a bug till next Wednesday, how long is it going to take us to fix it? Especially if 5 of us did that. But if when I hit the save button and I'm going to pack up my stuff, some siren goes off and like an email shows up on my phone and it says, dummy, you forgot a file. Or your change broke this thing, or you forgot, we always want our logs to go to Splunk instead of a directory on the server. And yours didn't do that. Okay, I'll sit back down, make my little, I only have 4 lines of code I pushed. So that's an easy fix. And nobody else has to wonder on Wednesday why the heck it broke. The sooner you fix it, and the less stuff you're fixing, the easier it is to fix, right? You don't have to fix stuff because we care about quality. This whole releasing thing is about caring about quality. We want our code to be good quality. So I believe that's continuous integration. That's how we put our work together. All right? Then there's this next idea, sort of a bigger idea called continuous delivery. So continuous delivery is not about working on code. Continuous delivery is about why you're making the code. You're building code so that something happens, so that it runs somewhere, or somebody can do something they couldn't do before. Continuous delivery is about trying to make that happen faster. Get my code to its real purpose in the world as quickly as I can and get the feedback loop about whether it actually did what I wanted to and whether it was a good idea in the first place. If I'm Tesla, continuous delivery runs my code on a car and drives it around a crazy course and tries to see if it crashes. It doesn't just like save it to a CI server and send me some emails. Like, continuous delivery is about getting your code to production. So I have a bigger picture for that one. There's only one real thing added here. I made 3 developers to make it look more complicated, but it's not really about that. It's the database after the CI server. You choose what goes into your release repository independently. You decide as a team, we're going to do releases now. We're not just going to do commits. We want to commit a lot. If we want to commit a lot, then we certainly don't want every commit to be a release. We want to have some policies about what we choose to test after commit. And anything you test, back on this slide over here, that breaks the commit won't allow a release to go out. So what does that mean? We can assume a bunch of things if we have a release in there. A release is in the repository means this, that, and the other thing were checked and they passed. I don't have to go look. I know it's in there. It wouldn't have got there otherwise. That's what releasing does. That's why not every commit is a release, right? We're holding back. You have to release things that you hold back. We're holding back commits that don't work because we're all human and we make mistakes. I've written software with bugs. I have a confession to make. So once upon a time, I wrote a bug. I'm sorry, I'm the only one in the room, I'm sure, but I'd rather that bug not go out to my users. So if I have something that prevents it from being a release, it can't go out to my users, and then I got these things under there. My releases don't just go to production, they go to some other environments first. Anybody have more environments than just production? Which ones do you have? I bet you all have the two I wrote there. Yeah, something about being a consultant, you get a lot, you get more examples, and everybody seems to have this thing called production, but some people have many productions. Some people, like, there's a restaurant down the street, they have thousands of productions because their code runs in stores, but instead of on the internet. But everybody has production. What is production? Production is a word, the root word of production is product. The root word of production is produce. Production produces value. That's what makes it production. That's when your code pays off because you spent money on making it, and your salaries went into making code to run in production to produce value. That's why everybody has production, except for startups. But they're going to produce value soon enough, hopefully. And then everybody seems to have this development thing, and that's something other than production that we have a lot of freedom in. It's the one that has the least amount of rules that we share. That's what we call development. And if you keep it that way, if you start making rules about development, then you're going to get another development because developers want some place to do whatever they want. Any developers in here? We don't like rules. So if somebody starts putting rules on development, we go make another development, even if we don't tell you about it. And then we have development, and we call yours something else, like test. Test has rules, yeah. So we use environments to check those releases. We made releases after we did some preliminary checks, and we made a lot of them, but not every release has to go all the way to users. We can hold releases. Releases are things that can be delivered or not, right? We can determine that some releases have gone to, maybe they've passed all of our functional testing, but we haven't done accessibility, or we haven't done penetration testing or performance testing, or something that takes a long time. Or maybe we need to get a SOX audit or some kind of policy that we're subject to. That's going to take a really long time. We don't want to hold everything up for that. So we make a release, we go stick it in the pile, and we go work on the next release. And if it ever gets through all those steps, it'll go to the users. And then if it's slow in those steps, well, then we can solve that problem over there instead of in our source control system. I think a lot of the branching stuff you see out there, all these rules about release branches and feature branches and develop branches and merging and don't merge, and all of that is because people keep trying to use a database source control to manage deployments and users and things. And it's not for that. It's a database for your changes. You want all of them in there, and that's it. Then you have releases, and those things can go have all these other tests about them, and you choose about how to deploy them. So we have production and development, and then we have more environments so that we can check whatever we want to check. And you make an environment when there's some people who care about that release not going to production, because otherwise you just send it to production. Right? If somebody doesn't want your release to go to production, they should have an environment they control. We get ourselves tangled up a lot by not letting them control it. Oh, I'm going to be in charge of all my environments. You want to test some stuff, but I can't test it till next Tuesday because we're doing this other thing. So give them their own environment. They're busy. They wouldn't tell if your software is good quality. The sooner you know if it's good quality, the easier it is to fix. So even if it's a security hole or even if it's a performance problem, why wait? Right? Make an environment for that, especially with cloud technology. You're all in here because you do DevOps. I bet you've done a bunch of cloud stuff. It's easy to make environments, at least easier than it used to be. So that's why we do environments. We want to check our code before it goes to production. And then we make policies about how it goes. And what we call this whole thing, that's a pipeline. The continuous delivery pipeline is what we decide at our own company or our own enterprise is the series of things we do before we put our code in production. and then how we get information back about it. It's a loop. It's a circle. But it looks like a line in all the tools, but it's really a circle. So I draw it as a circle. So a release is going to carry information about it based on our policies. We're going to know because it exists at all. There's certain quality things that are true. And then we're going to have some system that's running this pipeline that's going to tell us it worked in this environment. We're still working on it in that environment. These people said these bugs were okay. We released it to production, but then some users complained. Like, that release is going to have a whole little lifetime of its own. And that's all about trust. Do we trust that release? And it's okay. We expect some of them to die. We expect some of them not to make it. Every release is really a release candidate. In fact, Linux still does that. Linux still has this whole separate way of numbering their release candidates versus their releases. But in the end, every release is a release candidate. Nobody's going to run it if it's bad. They'll find out there's some critical OpenSSL vulnerability, and then they will never run that release again, no matter if you called it production or not. Right? They get to choose if they run it. So we choose when we make the releases, which gives us the power to decide how significant a release is. As long as we're making a policy, right? It's a release. If we do these things, it goes through these environments. If we do those things, we get to make up our pipeline. So that means we get to invest as much trust as we want in that release, which saves us from wondering, I wonder if that's going to work. Oh boy, we're going to have a Super Bowl we're going to have a Super Bowl commercial next week. I wonder if our software is going to work. What release is out there? Did we send it through performance testing? Oh, good. I'm going home. I'm going to cook my brisket for the Super Bowl. Right? Because I can just trust it. Okay, we tested that release. Or maybe it's still in performance testing and I'm not going to cook a brisket. Right? It's about people. Releasing is about the people trying to deliver the changes to the software. So, the rest of this talk is you guys. I'm going to give you some silence and let you think about this question. I need somebody to tell me if they see any on Twitch, because I can't see the Twitch chat. I won't call on you. I'll let you raise your hand. Yeah. What's your name? Alex? You have a QA department that stops you from releasing. Wow, a whole department. Their job is to not release software? That's amazing. Seems like that sometimes. What's your name in the back? Jordan, did you have one? No. You release everything? Yeah. Mitch, what? Code reviews prevent you from releasing to production. You do them before you release. Complete code reviews. So incomplete code reviews stop you. I did the programmer's mistake of testing for a negative. So not having a complete code review prevents you from going to production. Mm-hmm.
Two things really. We have legitimate windows where we can't make changes because of our clients.
So he has a release window where they choose not to make changes because their clients would not like that very much.
Right. They don't want to change. But in the windows where we do have change, what stops us is just risk. I call it the boogie monster. Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown is the other thing that stops them from risk. So that sounds like an information problem. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Is it a problem? It may not be a problem. Sometimes we choose not to release on purpose, right? Sometimes it's a bad reason. Sometimes it's very much a good reason. Failing tests. Caleb, if he has some failing tests, he doesn't release. How many people have releases in their process now? Do you version number them? They have names, dates. What do you got? What do you have? How do you identify releases? What? A commit hash. So so some commit hashes, how do you tell them apart from the other commit hashes? What? So every commit hash is a release at yours? Or? So they use a source control system with a master branch, and every commit hash in the master branch indicates a release. That's one way to do it. If it's not there, it's not released. Does that anybody do a different thing? What do you do? You make version numbers? Where do you write them down? Everywhere. So the software in production, like it exposes its version number in the user interface, or yeah, that's cool. In the log files too. Do you know what the version number is while you're deploying it? Is it available, or is it just after deployment you can tell? It's the next one in line. Yeah. So deployment and release is a very different thing, right? You can deploy a release to one environment and then deploy that release to the next environment and then deploy that same release to another environment. So a release is what's getting deployed, and deployment is the action of making it run. I'm going to try. So Clayton's observing. I try to repeat it back, make sure I got it. He's now working in the Java world, and he came from the Ruby world, and he says different communities, like the Ruby world doesn't have this idea of a item that you release and deploy. It has, and the Java world does, right? I mean, I thought Ruby has gems.
Yeah, you can release a gem, but like most applications aren't gems.
So the common practice in the Ruby world is only to use gems for libraries, I guess, not for the final product. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that in JavaScript some too. Like they have whatever NPM node module things are, but they don't use that to deploy. They just use that for the libraries. Yeah. It's so funny how every different technology has different releasable things.
I'll follow up, sorry. The reason I mentioned that is because you said when you build a release, that release is the same in each environment that you put it into.
Right.
But that is not the common practice in some languages. Like, you have to rebuild that code every time you start the app in JavaScript, for example. Usually, unless you can, so I'm saying.
So Clayton's sort of pointing out, I guess, in his experience in the Ruby world, you do a build and a deploy together for every environment. You don't build something and then deploy that from environment to environment. I can tell you I've seen that in every language, and I've seen the opposite in every language too. So it is definitely a choice you make, because you can make a tar or a jar or a zip of anything, right? I think I definitely agree though. JavaScript and Ruby, and I don't know, maybe Python, they have eggs, but they tend to do the build and deploy together, right? And until now that there's Docker images, that's not so much true. But yeah, in some languages, they make a deployable thing more often than others. I'd agree. So I put another question up. I don't have to repeat your name if this needs to stay anonymous. I'm sure a bunch of you have access to grind. Like there's things you'd change only if X or only if Y. I wish I could fire the whole QA department. Just kidding. I wish the QA department could do QA. I love QA. But I don't think they should stop releases. That's not this talk. What could change? What makes sense to change? Everybody has something to improve. Bodybuilders still lift weights. Yeah. They need a terminal test server at the end of their process. Ah, that's a good point. So they have deployment for testing right before testing instead of right after development. Seems like the same thing, but it's not the same thing. It's way earlier, right after development, than right before testing, right? There's that whole weekend problem in the Super Bowl and the brisket. I like brisket. So I need to repeat that for the stream, and I can't. So what it was, can someone summarize so I can tell the people on the internet?
You know, just when we implement continuous integration, it'll become part of the process. That will go in and build all the way to the server.
Yeah.
So it's ready to be tested at that time.
So what they'd like to do is automate the build, testing, and deployment all the way to their QA server as early as possible without human intervention, right? And right now it's not only human intervention, it's human intervention right before they do their testing. Yeah. So anybody run more than one piece of software in their enterprise, or do you all just have one? As you have macro giganto services or micro services or somewhere in the middle. Do you release it all, or do you release parts? Most of us release parts. Does that cause any issues in your testing? Because you have to make them work together? So there's technology out there to make a release out of releases, right? That's kind of what Docker started doing, but it's not the only part of the puzzle. Kubernetes, I mean, all the way up the stack to Chef and Terraform, like the servers it runs on, the network it's on, the security policies, you can put it all in a version. And all a version of one thing can be is a bunch of versions of the next thing down, right? So when I was looking for ways to change your release process, basically the way you find a problem in your release process is you look for quality issues that are discovered too late or take too long to fix. And that's where you need to fix your release process. You want to move, what do they call it, shift left? You need to move that testing earlier so that it's easier and not a surprise. And one of the things in our microservices world is all the mini little bits that have to work together properly. Now I tested my bit. My bit's awesome. It passed all my tests. And then I ran it with 75 other bits and it didn't work. I don't understand. That's a release too. If you're not versioning the combination of what you're running, you can. It's just as easy as what you did to version that first part. So that's one opportunity for change. And if you're not having that problem, don't do that. Complexity costs something. But whatever it is that's surprising you, whatever it is, then you have a quality problem that you didn't expect. That's probably your clue. That's where you can go fix something. You can make your release process better. That's an asset for your company too. The software you're making is an asset. And also the way you make it is an asset. You're investing in your company when you make it better at changing its software. If you can make it stick so that when you leave, they still do it. That's installing people software, but it's not PeopleSoft. Yeah. All right. That's all I got.